and HDN with another video, now with how to draw scenarios in perspective. But first, I would like to remember that this video is a part of a playlist about introduction to perspective, and the links for my Instagram and the Discord server are available in the video description. I am assuming that you already have a basic knowledge of perspective, or you already watched and applied the contents for the previous videos of the playlist. You can see that this video is the part 1 of 2 about drawing scenarios in perspective. I decided to split in 2 parts because the first part will be about theoretical things. On the other hand, the second part will be about practical things and with more complex techniques. When it comes to draw and design a scenario, we need to answer 5 questions. What the scenario is about, where the scenario take place, when the scenario take place, who will use the scenario, and why we are building the scenario. So with that, I started planning my scenario. I used the logic of a video game where we have a functional scenarios. We know that the player will go inside the scenario, will explore the scenario, and will go outside the scenario. We have 2 points here. We have the point A when the player go inside the scenario, and we have the point B when the player go outside the scenario. And the pathing between the A and B will be the experience that the user will have, the player. In this A to B travel process, we have to guide the player to explore the environment in the way that we want. Based on that, my idea was to design a hotel lobby. I always start with my orthographic view, specifically the top view. I started sketching my idea. I decided to not have a perfect rectangle scenarios. I decided to extend the entrance and also the exit. You can see that I drew a carpet that connects the entrance to the exit to indirectly guide the player. And I also extended a part on the down left corner of the scenario so the user can explore that part as well. After that, I started mapping my top view. Here I just use the techniques to divide and multiply dimensions to be able to have measurements to project this in a different view. And I ended with a 4x4 scenario. The next step is to put this into perspective. Now I'm not thinking about put this in an accurate perspective with correct lines, correct vanishing point. I'm still in an exploration phase without thinking about perfect lines and stuff. The first thing that I did was to draw my flow plane, and I made the same mapping that I made on the top view, and I started drawing the flow plane of the scenario. At this stage, I started changing a little bit the measurements that I did previously, because I found that things that I did previously wasn't behaving on the way that I was thinking in this different view. After that, I started drawing the walls, and I also added the thickness of the walls. On the next stage, I started giving volume to the points where I will place the furniture, and I also drew frames on the walls. So our scenario have walls, but I want to show what's inside of my scenario. For that, I made a bunch of cross section on the wall to be able to see what's inside our scenario. With my basic idea on the point, I started putting it into perspective. I used 2 vanishing points. I started drawing my flow plane, and I used the mapping line as a guide to draw in blue the basic lines to the flow plane of our environment. In green, I started giving volume to the points where will be placed the furniture. After that, I started mapping the walls, and I also made the cross sections so we'll be able to see inside our environment. At this stage, my basic idea was already in perspective. The next step is to start sketching the furniture and other elements. For that, I used a bunch of references. After that, I added a basic color so you'll be able to understand what I was trying to draw. And I added a bunch of light sources, but I didn't use the knowledge of shadow in perspective. But we already have a video here on the channel talking about how to draw shadow in perspective. We already have our basic idea in perspective. Now I decided to explore in a different angle. For scaling purposes, I used a human figure inside our scenario. We have a sofa inside our scenario. I decided to use a low angle camera inspired in GTA and John Wick cutscenes. I started drawing a figure After that, I made the base sketch of the sofa and I made sure that all the things are correct in perspective. And I also placed the frame that we have inside our scenario. And I added the final details. So my goal with this video was to show how we can create scenarios in perspective that answer that 5 questions that we talked about on the beginning of the video. We have to remember that this is a playlist about introduction to perspective. So I'm trying to put this in a simpler way, but talking about hard things that will level up your skills. On the next video, I'm talking about the part 2. We'll talk about more complex things, using a more complex techniques to draw a scenario in perspective. We are on the end of the video. If I helped, consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and also enable the bell so you will be notified of new updates here on the channel. And the links for my Instagram and the Discord server of the channel are available in the video description. Bye bye, until the next one.